Welcome back, everybody, to Getting Past the Premium. We are excited to bring you part 2 with Steve Atkinson with Buckingham Strategic Partners, where we're going to continue with his experience in the industry, seeing the financial services side of the industry go from being a sales-based, product-based industry to more of that advisory model. And so we're excited to have you listen in and enjoy.
Welcome to the Getting Past the Premium podcast.
Welcome back, boys. Good to see you again.
Yep, good to be here.
Thanks for being here again, Steve.
guys.
Still on the Woodford train, right?
Yep.
It's a good one to be on. So we thought we'd continue our conversation from part 1, right? Around, we kind of ended that talking about who that burden of connecting all these different areas in the client's life, whether that's a business or somebody's personal life, who kind of that burden falls on when you look at that. Take it the sales product-based model versus that true advisor model. Mm-hmm. And, the burden falling on the client in one side of that and the advisor on the other, and what is better ultimately for the client. And I think, Ryan, you had an example you wanted to use there.
We were just talking a little while ago about circumstance we were in. We went in to chat with a prospect, actually pretty well-run company locally, and we went in to talk to them about them hiring us from an advisory capacity. Mm-hmm. And the conversation's dramatically different than obviously what a traditional risk management conversation would be.
What they were probably expecting.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, we had to overcome an objection in the email because, it's like, hey, we want to come in and talk to you about risk management. And their defenses go up right away. Oh, you want to talk to us about insurance? And it's like, well, that's obviously part of the conversation, but that's not the entire conversation. So we got in there and we started asking them some questions about their company and And I said, all right, guys, let's kind of break this down a little bit. And I asked them what their top 3 risks were across the company. And there were 3 people in the meeting. I asked them individually. So we wrote them up and at
were
the
you
end.
whiteboarding right now?
We were, yeah. I am right now in my head.
Can't get through a meeting without whiteboarding.
No, I love it. So anyway, we got through that exercise, and lo and behold, like the majority of the time, these risks had really a lot to do with the success of the company, but nobody was helping them professionally manage through these risks. The back half of the exercise was, okay, who's helping you walk through them? Is it internally, i.e. somebody inside the company, or externally, somebody you're paying to help from a risk management perspective? All of the big ones fell internally.
And they have advisors they're paying in certain capacities, right?
Large sums of cash, because their top 3 spends, like one of those is health insurance.
Got it.
And producers and agents are paid from the commission that they make off of that spend. So it's massive. We started to change the way that they think about risk management. There's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. It was an interesting dialogue. So, going back to your intro on how advisors are trying to change the way clients think about our industry, it's a great specific example. So,
one thing I want to jump in and see, we've used the term like sales-based or product-based. Maybe a better way to describe this is, we're all in different relationships. Maybe we call it transactional based relationships, right? Yeah. Versus
product-based,
advisory-based. Yeah, do you get your advice by transacting? Like I go to you, I have a problem, I get an answer, I go home, right? Or versus an ongoing, where it becomes into a continuum versus per episode.
Yeah,
right?
That's a good way to describe it. I think as we've been talking through it, it is transactional versus kind of in the first episode we talked that a product-based person isn't bad.
Correct.
You can still be an advisor.
People aren't intentionally doing anything wrong.
Correct.
They think they're doing the right thing. But like in your example of the company who might have 3, you said 3 advisors paying a lot of money, health insurance. Well, those are probably transactional relationships.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
But we all know that we know how to get in shape and lose weight, right? I mean,
Well,
I can transact and go to
I'm
the
still
store.
trying to figure it out.
I can transact and go to the store and buy like a lean cuisine meal, right? I can go and buy a weight gym or something like that, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah.
Right. So we can get all the components, get all the pieces, but where you make a difference when you have a true coach, right? And that's where I think the real piece of being an advisor becomes is you're invested in the relationship when you don't have to be.
Yeah.
Right. Meaning, and in that example, like not getting compensated, you don't have to be. Right. So that ongoing fee based, you're always looking out for the client's best interest to get their outcomes. And without that piece of whether it's a business owner or an individual client, someone in their life, they carry that burden.
Yep.
Right? They have to be the ones going, oh God, what's next? What haven't I thought about?
Yeah.
Piecing it all together.
Yeah, I got to wake up tomorrow. I got to motivate myself. Well, that's tough, right?
Yeah.
There's a great book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth. And the whole premise is business owners spend way too much time working in the business. And how do you step out and work on the business? Well, a business coach or an advisory coach can help you work on the business because you got enough on your plate working in the business to run it.
Yeah, I think one of the best points of your example there is though, there's three people in some sort of a capacity that have the ability to be that advisor. Whether or not they are, whether they may be that transactional person, but they're in some sort of a capacity to transition whatever they're doing to that advisory role.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're helping the client in one of the top three, whether that's expenses or impacts to the company. And it's that choice, I guess. What model do you as that person want to operate in? And what makes the most impact to the client, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, there were a couple things, coming out of that. I think off of the heels of what you were saying, there's a fantastic TED Talk out there. It's just called Get a Coach, and it's about a physician who brings in an outside coach that oversees him doing surgery and how to become better at his practice when he was already at the top of the game. I think about that a little bit from the business owner's perspective, and your book, The E-Myth, because these business owners they're inside their company all day, every day. And, I'm sitting there in that meeting and I'm like, okay, guys, so all your largest risks are coming back to you guys to fight through. You're not bringing in anybody to help you. And so how are you managing through those? And the funny thing is that we all gauge risk different with how familiar we are with the company. So I'll try to say that a different way, but when you're inside the business and you build it, like you understand the risks that you're taking and you probably quantify them differently than an outside advisor would coming in with that objective approach. Like, whoa, dude, you're taking on way too much risk here. And the business owner's like, well, I know, but man, I've done it from jump and like I'm comfortable with it because I know it and I can control it and da.
But you may not have to.
Yeah, there may be a better way, but you don't know because you don't have that outside objective coach.
Yeah, and they may have, whatever that topic was, they may feel comfortable with that risk, but they may have blind spots because they're so invested in one area. And when you take on risk, you're taking on stress, obviously. So that just only compounds things where, everybody has we all have blind spots, right? And that's where a coach's job is to come in and tell you, hey, you got X, Y, and Z covered, but it's your mission A, B, and C, right? If you pay attention to A, B, and C. And when you're so busy working on something and so passionate about something where it has to work, right? That business owner that, they're taking on a lot of risk, in their mind, it has to work, right? So to make this one thing work, what is falling? Right, you're not paying attention to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Michael Jordan had Phil Jackson, right? He never stopped having a coach. Kevin Durant has Steve Nash. Maybe not best analogy.
Michael Jordan has Scottie Pippen.
That's true.
Dennis Rodman, too.
Yeah.
And Durant had
Kyrie Irving.
Who's the guy at Golden State? Curry.
Oh, yeah, Steph Curry.
Yeah,
that helped.
Yeah. I mean, we get your point.
Yeah. But, so maybe describe, as you've seen the evolution in this industry, those that work best as that quarterback, as the advisor. How do they act? What do they do? How do they help the client? How does that whole picture work?
It's an interesting question, and just because using the term quarterback. So the ones that do it the best do not view themselves as a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody once said to an advisor, "Who anointed you the quarterback?" Right. So I think the way I'd answer that question is the advisors that work in a team environment the best are great at collaborating.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone has a seat at the table. They're not the head of the table. Actually, the best advisors aren't at the head of the table. They speak the least. Right. Their job is to prompt others to add the value, and they're comfortable not being in the limelight.
Yeah.
I would say that's the people that do it the best.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, bring in the experts. Right. If these are transactional people to bring the right services at the right time for your client, bring them in. Let them do the talking. You focus on the client. Right.
Yeah.
Be the master at the relationship. And in any relationship, people would rather talk about themselves than hear you talk.
Yeah.
Right. So the best ones talk the least.
That's a good point. I mean, Erica Moorhead from a couple episodes ago, that was exactly what she said as well from Collaborative Planning Group. And typically, if you go out and find the right people, they're the ones with the deep breadth of knowledge in that particular area, and they're not trying to necessarily be the quarterback, right? Because they understand where they sit in that capacity.
Yeah, they're brought in for a specialist solution. They have an expertise there. You got to be careful there. You don't want to talk too much, right?
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in the iceberg approach to communicating. You go right down to the bottom of the water where all the iceberg's way underwater. You see a little bit above water, but a lot of these experts like to talk about how much they know, and it just goes right over the client's head, right? They're like, I just want to know I'm covered.
Yeah.
Just let them take you deep, and if they don't take you deep, you don't got to keep talking about how great you are.
Yeah.
We were doing some work internally a couple weeks ago around the Story Brand book and messaging, and that's exactly the way that you should position yourself. They call it the guide, be the guide, and you make the client be the superhero,
right?
And it's that same mentality. You're just helping them along their path.
Yeah. And I think I was listening to a podcast the other day. I think it's the one you sent me, The Millionaire Producer with Charles Specht, I think it is.
Yeah.
But he talked about when you think about from the client's perspective, what do they actually want? Like when it comes to insurance or financial services, to your point, they don't want to understand. They're not going to understand the insurance policy, nor do they want to. They just want to know they're covered.
Right.
But more so what they want is they want peace of mind in knowing that you are understanding it, that you have some sort of a way that you're making sure you understand their situation and you're putting the right products in place, right? And if you can help them understand that whatever you're doing on the back end, it's not just, hey, I'm Elliot and I know what I'm doing. It's no, you have a process that you walk through to understand that. You're going to provide that sense of security in their mind. That's ultimately what they want, right? And they want to be able to come to you and say, this happened. We talked about it. I'm covered, right? And ultimately, if you can do that and make it simple, you're going to win more so than you're going to lose those deals, right?
There's an idea called the back of the napkin conversations. But if you can't explain what you do on the back of a napkin, whether it's drawing a picture or writing it out, you're probably taking too long. You're probably going too deep.
Yeah.
And most of us can actually, on the back of a napkin, a few words or a few pictures explain what we do to people.
Yeah. Most of us.
Yeah, work out. You get there.
Yeah. We're trying, right?
There is, who's the artist that does the pictures
Dan
in
Rome.
the book? Yeah, it's a fantastic book out there with Dan Rome, and he walks you through how to explain what you do and how you do it.
We do have a nice book.
It'd be a good
here.
resource.
With 27 principles every investor should know.
Yeah,
Written by Steve Atkinson.
And Dan Rome did the pictures.
And there you go.
There you go. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's actually a good unintentional segue into maybe a little bit different topic of education for clients, right? So you've seen a lot, and I know you kind of coach advisors a lot on how to bring value to whether it's a client or a potential client and use that from a educational, marketing perspective. Maybe transition into some of that you're doing on that side of the industry to help people maybe think through how they could.
The education piece.
Yeah.
Again, in this industry just for 25 years, but you see a lot of advisors do educational, seminars or programs, and I'm a big believer in education. I think that's one of the biggest values that clients are paying for from their advisor. So I always told advisors, like, you should always have a calendar of events where your clients every single day have an opportunity for someone else to unload a financial burden on their plate, right? Now your client carries that burden. Now the chance of them calling you up out of the blue, because they know you're busy as well, they're going, hey Ryan, I got a question. My neighbor asked me this, right? I mean, they're probably not going to call you with that because they know you're busy. Mm-hmm. But if they know there's an opportunity in the future to come to a webinar, come to a phone call, come to something, right? And they can either bring that person along with them or they can ask the question on behalf of their. It's important that they know that education and getting their questions answered or the people they care about questions answered, it's a huge value, right? Mm-hmm. And not enough advisors do it. Or when they do educational events, they're actually product seminars, right? Mm-hmm. Sales-based seminars. There's like almost a side industry where clients get their mailer out and they go, oh, that's a good restaurant. Ooh, that's a good meal. I'll do that. I'll take the beating of trying to get scheduled a meeting for 5 times, But the best ones I've seen are where it's truly education and there is no, at the end of this, here's our calendar of sign up for a time slot, right? So if it's truly education, and people will find you, they'll come. They will find a way to talk to you, right? Just be yourself and be personable. But education's huge, and it's not done enough, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, again, I guess for our audience and maybe where they're at in their career, and again, somebody is eagerly trying to understand how they can make this leap between where they're at today in the risk management industry and coming over and being more of an advisor. How do you start just walking down a pretty strict education road, hoping, that people are going to come around and see you differently and be in a better spot than your transactional counterpart?
Mm-hmm. How would you do that yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, again, there's no better way to get to know the answer to that question than ask your clients, right? I mean, if it were me, I'd probably ask my clients, like, well, what are some of the things that are keeping you up at night, right? When you think about, your financial future or risks in your life or opportunities that really you have a lot of passion around, what are some of the things that you wish you knew more about, right? You add that question to your client conversations, you're going to make a list of a bunch of topics, right? And there's probably somebody in your community that can speak on that topic for them. I would probably, if I'm just doing, let's say I'm a transactional and I'm just an insurance person, right? Maybe I go and interview a handful of investment advisors in my area and say, hey, let's do some stuff together. Right? You do, and obviously if they're not competing with you, right? Mm-hmm. You do the investments, I do this. Let's come together and add value to both of our client sets.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that'd be a start. Mm-hmm.
It's funny, that's the second time you've told me today to just ask your clients, which I think is such an underutilized technique to find these things out. We sit in these rooms and we try to come up with all these ideas, and at the end of the day, it's like, so just go ask some clients.
I think there's a reason for that. Our industry, it's an expert-based industry. Like you're told and taught, all the trainings train us to be, you need to be the expert, right? Well, here's the deal. Here's the catch. You're never going to be the expert in everything, right? You can't. Even the best CPAs have to look up things time to time, right? So when you look up, you're going to go to another resource. So, but there's this, and I don't know if it's to overcome, not being a salesperson or whatever it is, but I would say times changed. Maybe in the 80s when people didn't have access to the same information you had, you could kind of pull off the expert role, But today with the phone, I mean, you talk to my kids who are almost 20, right? They don't listen to anybody's expert advice, right? They're going to take it, then they're going to synthesize it with a group of friends and go, what do you guys think? Then as a group, they're going to make a decision. And that's the beauty of everybody had the information. You can kind of cull through all the BS, right? Who's just trying to get in my pocket here? So,
half my family members think they have PhDs. They're like, something's wrong with my finger.
So I keep saying go back to the client because just be more collaborative. Just take off the veil of you're the expert, they're not, and say, hey, we both have the same set of information, but what I don't know is what's really keeping you up at night. Right? No expert can anticipate that.
Such an easy conversation, too.
It is. It's the conversation the clients want to have.
Yeah.
There's an old saying that we use around our company, and that is The real expert is not the person who knows, it's the person who knows who knows.
Yeah.
Right? And we should all have a list of people who know things. So that when we get brought a problem, we go, I'm not sure, but I know who knows.
Mm-hmm.
And you bring that resource to your client. That's the true expert.
Yeah.
That's a great point in how I kind of think about the evolution on the financial services side of the industry. Has probably certainly not there yet as a whole, but has gone more that route versus probably the P&C side, where I still feel like a lot of that is, man, if I don't have the answer, my client's going to find somebody else or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so people forget a lot of times that it's perfectly fine to say, hey, I'm not sure on that answer, this coverage question or whatever. Let me go back and I'll find it out and then I'll get back to you tomorrow or whatnot. I feel like people they think that they have to have that answer and be that expert, and less of that advisor to say, hey, you know what? I'm not the expert in cyber liability, but I can find, or I know the expert that we're going to bring onto the team that's going to make sure we get this thing set up right. Yeah.
Well, here's the deal with the expert piece. Obviously, they're the people that are great salespeople, usually the highest achievers. They're great influencers, right? They're passionate, they're charismatic, and they can tell great stories. And again, they're this perceived expert. But that relationship with the client is based on that. So what happens when that client meets somebody who's even more charismatic, more influential? They'll just move, right? Versus taking the opposite approach. What you're talking about, what we're talking about here is just say, hey, listen, let's just have a conversation. There's a lot I know about. There's a lot I don't know about, but I know who knows a lot about it. I'm going to bring a bunch of people to you. Now, that interaction, what's fascinating to me is I think a client that is interacting with a bunch of people who are humble, they kind of know their limits, but they know how to surround themselves with their experts. When they meet that one person who has all the answers, who's so influential, they're probably going to go, you know what? Do I really want to give up this team of 8 or 9 people to go to this one? Does this one is charismatic and as influential as they are they really going to do better for me than these 8 or 9 people who all come at it from a different perspective? I think your clients are going to choose the team-based approach there.
Well, and there's the science and the data behind that from a stickiness approach. Just even the old school, if you do more for a client, even product-wise, they're more sticky. And then you put that to the next degree of more people around that client that are all working together.
I can only advisory capacity.
Yeah, I would imagine if we had statistics on it that it would only exponentially.
We get more statistics. I like it. On the fly numbers.
I'm looking at Big Al. I'm sure it's 80-20. Right, Ryan?
We're just trying to change. Yeah, that's what we default to
every time.
83% of statistics are made up on the spot.
There you go. Well, go ahead. No, yeah. So I think that you're spot on with that, and I feel like, again, the industry that you've seen grow, the side of the industry that you've seen grow, has probably made that shift better than the P&C side, which is what we talk about a lot here. That we feel like the P&C is maybe where the financial services was in the 90s, right? As far as this piece of it, and so when you think about one thing we were talking about. In between our episodes here was this hurdle of, the P&C side are products that people have to buy.
Right.
And that naturally leads to kind of that recurring revenue stream that's pretty sticky.
Right.
You kind of have to screw up in order for somebody to really want to move.
Yeah.
Or a client maybe does see that there's a better mousetrap out there that somebody else is bringing, and that does necessitate a move. So we were kind of discussing that. Does that provide a hurdle for this industry to make this shift?
Yeah.
And just kind of some of your thoughts around that piece of it.
Yeah, every industry is different, right? And whether or not the financial services industry has done it better than insurance. It sounds like the insurance really hasn't done it yet. Yeah. So jury's out if they're going to do it better.
Correct.
They just went early. they went first. But I think if you're in an industry where, again, the majority of the industry is still recurring revenue, transactional, and you have a high retention rate, why change? Why force a change when it's not forced upon you? I guess what I'd be thinking about is what happens if, like, a wealth management firm who does risk management, maybe not P&C, right?
Yeah.
But legacy planning, charitable planning, asset management, there's all this stuff, and they go, you know what? we're going to bring in our own in-house PNC. Right now, it's all under one roof, all looked at one way. Clients can have the same conversation at the same place. Everybody knows everything. That's probably going to be the future at some point. Everything's going to be consolidated, and you have a team of experts.
There are firms like that.
Sure, there are. Yeah,
today.
Yeah, you're right. But as that becomes more prevalent, if I was that transactional, just PNC, and I'm relying on the 92% retention rate, I would be asking myself, does that model sound better for my client, or does my model sound better for my client? And I can either wait until I'm forced, or I can do something now, and maybe I can just be happy with myself because I was an early adopter.
Yeah. And if you're in doubt, ask your client.
Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly.
Well, I think what you highlighted too a second ago is that it doesn't have to be this monumental shift. You could do exactly what you're doing today, have your same model, and surround yourself with the team that you talked about to put around the client, and ultimately achieve what we're discussing without having to make some big shift in your business model or your how you transact business. Because again, you don't, just because you're commission based or you get paid via product doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing anything wrong by the client.
Right.
It could, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. And so just take that next step to say, how can I bring this level of thinking to my client without having to make a monumental shift in my business? Find the right people.
You're spot on. It's just how do you get a voice at the table where there's other voices at the table? Being collaborative.
Yeah.
You don't have to change it. You can keep doing exactly what you're doing, but now you have a voice at the table with the accountant, and whereas maybe you don't have it today. Right?
Yeah.
So again, your client has to carry that burden.
Yeah.
And if they find a way where they can offload that burden, they will.
Yeah. Well, one of the I'll kick it to you in a second, but just to wrap that up, is something really simple we've heard folks doing is just do a roundtable with those advisors. So just be the one to come to your client and say, hey, you know what? You've got all these people advising you, me included, on some products, whatever it is. Let's just schedule once a year where we all get together and just talk through what each is doing.
Sure.
You don't have to be the leader of it. Somebody's going to take the lead and just say, I think it's a good idea that we all get together.
Sure.
I think it's a great idea. We've talked about that.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of advisors that don't even look at the insurance.
Yeah.
Right. So this piece. So you imagine, so their business is handling the assets. Right. Imagine they have a client who has a huge risk exposure. Maybe they don't have an umbrella or whatever it might be. Right now, something unexpected happens, and the assets are what is going to cover the penalty for that risk, whatever, right? Well, that advisor's business is now in jeopardy because of holes that they failed to address, and because you weren't talking, you both failed to address it, and your client, they're living their own life.
Yeah.
Their job is not to do all this stuff.
They're caught in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the good news about us is the future of advice is only going to get better. Because we're coming from a kind of a low, maybe a low place historically.
A low bar.
Well, so it's kind of interesting, like you said, the insurance industry really hasn't started, or we're in the infancy of starting this transition. The wealth management space has transitioned significantly faster. We could probably have a whole nother conversation on why with, 01, 02 and 08, 09 and different events that have happened that have expedited the way that advice is delivered today. But, from a timing perspective on the insurance side, there really hasn't been any events that have catapulted, a change in the way that risk management advice is delivered. But it's kind of interesting because we were chatting about that, the wealth management space has gone hard in the paint against risk management because of the commission-based products and da-da-da-da-da. And what I kind of heard you mention is that at some point, maybe through a different delivery model or something, that a lot of that advice is going to come back around 360 degrees around a client and be like, okay, listen, let's get the right people around the table and let's make the right decisions to help move you forward in your life, however you want to do that.
I think it has to. It has to. I mean, just ask yourself, how do you want it all be looked at in one, 360? Of course you do.
Yeah.
Right. I think, part of what you mentioned about the wealth management space, I think the pendulum shifted too far. I think when people went independent and kind of became this the client's advisor, they wanted to get as far away from where they were, and that was working for a product manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
Being the sales rep, that they said, I'm going to go all the way, no commissions at all, right? But
hard in the paint, nothing to do with anybody else. That's
But there are products that are only sold or majority sold through a commission structure that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now the question is, maybe the reality is those products are really geared for far fewer people than it's being sold to today, right? They should really fit a solution for a problem versus I know a lot of people in this industry that it's the old saying, when you're a hammer, everybody looks like a nail, right? I got a product and I'm going to find a way to jam it in them, right? But that's the opposite of where everybody wants to go to. But I think it's going to have to, at some point in time, it's going to go full circle where we're doing everything and taking a total picture for the client, because they're going to drive it. They're going to drive that solution.
Where do you think, this is a big question, but you're sitting in the wealth management industry 10 years from now with how we deliver advice. How do you see it being different? How do you see it evolving over the next decade, knowing what you know today?
I wish I had a crystal ball. So there's a lot of moving parts in there. So I'm not going to give anything specific, but I would say that 10 years from now, you're going to need to be able to have a real open conversation with your client more than you are today, right? About things that aren't just numbers and dollar values and your returns and things like that. There's just too many. Clients they're educated too much, or they have too much information, and the access to other people feeding them information is too much, that they're going to have a lot of stuff that they just want to get off their chest and talk about, right? So the people that are able to have and carry forth a dialogue about things that maybe have nothing to do with anything you're going to offer the client, but just helping someone talk through it so it no longer becomes a burden, that's a value, right? It's part of the relationship. So I'm all in that the people that know how to connect with clients, have real conversations where the clients do the talking, that's the future.
Yeah.
A lot of this other stuff is going to be automated. A lot more things you're going to be able to buy online at really low cost. So how do you make the money unless it's helping provide and put clients at ease and help them live a better life without carrying the burden of all these things that's getting in their way?
Absolutely. And the beauty of that, I think, is not only is that what we feel like is the better path forward for the client, but it also mitigates that existential threat, essentially, of whatever that delivery mechanism comes in the future, which is going to happen.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that on the podcast. There's going to be better, more efficient ways to deliver insurance, to deliver financial products, whatever it is. And so if you're in that advisor role, or if you're in a role where you're being paid to deliver those products, look at how you're going to be paid when those products can be delivered that much cheaper and easier. So,
other countries have already beaten us there. You cannot call yourself an advisor if you're being paid by product manufacturers. Right. Other countries, you have to state on your business card, or business cards anymore, but your title that you are a salesperson, right? Because you work for the manufacturer. But if you're an advisor, you almost, in Australia, you have to have an annual contract. Like, this is what we are going to do, and this is what we are charging you. And the client, and you sign it. We're not there in the U.S., but maybe 10 years you are, and it's a different model than you're working in today if you're only getting compensated through products.
Totally. Well, man, I think that's been a couple great episodes for everybody. We appreciate you coming in.
Yeah,
it's a lot of
really valuable.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Always good when we can drink some Woodford too.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You got it, man.
All right, take care.
See you, everybody.